This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Thank you all for coming. This is a bit daunting. When I was asked to do a last lecture, I thought, oh, this is, a bit worrying, right? I don't want to be superstitious, so I called it a last lecture instead of the last lecture. Yeah, and this is a very different thing for me. So what I tried to do was think about things that I've learned in my years around, and tell you a few things from my journey that I feel like are most important. So that's why I call this What Matters Most. And of course, this is what I feel like has mattered most. You may not agree, that's fine. And I have 5 points, and it shouldn't take too long. I know you're hungry, so we'll make sure that it's not too long. But I don't have this little safe podium in front of me where I could put my watch and my notes. So, if I look like I'm going too long, just wave or something. But I'll try to keep it at the right time. So I have 5 points, and they're somewhat interconnected, but I just wanted to give you some idea of things that have been important to me and that have led me to where I am today. So the first, okay, and technology-wise, we're a bit, this is different for me, so if I make technical mistakes, just bear with me here. Well, okay, is this gonna, oh, one too many. There, okay. My first point, know yourself. This really has to do with understanding other people as well as knowing yourself. But we all grow up in particular social contexts. Here's my sociology coming out for you. But we grow up in particular social contexts, and when we're kids, we don't realize that our context is different from other people's. We think ours is the one that's ordinary, right? When you grow up, you think your life is ordinary. And the first thing of trying to kind of connect with other people is realizing that your experience may not be everyone else's. But you need to understand your own first and where you're coming from in order to try and understand other people and realize that they may be different than you. And I bring this up because my childhood experience, most of you would think is very unusual. I thought it was very ordinary. And so I will tell you a little about this. My father was an astronaut. He walked on the moon. So this is, not very ordinary for most people, right? But it was for me, which people find very odd, but it was. And I'm gonna explain this photo spread from Life magazine here in a minute. We moved to Houston, Texas when I was 3. My father was first a test pilot, and he, went to Edwards Air Force Base in California and flew jets and tested all sorts of planes. And then he joined NASA in 1963 or 64. We moved to Texas. And he started in the Gemini program. He flew a Gemini flight, and then he flew 2 Apollo flights. So I was in Houston for all of my elementary school years. And the community we moved to, the only other people that lived there were other astronaut families or other people that worked at NASA. So it was a really closed community. And all my best friends' fathers did do the same thing mine did. 1 month your father went up in space, and the next month mine went up in space, and it was just what everyone did. I'm serious. I mean, this is weird, right? But that's what I thought, right? Everyone's father goes and does this. So it was actually quite a long time before I realized not everyone's father did this kind of thing. But it was a really interesting growing up time, and I learned that later when we moved to California, actually. But what I wanted to show you here as an illustration of how when you grow up you think your context is just ordinary. During Apollo 9, this was my father's first Apollo flight, and the Life magazine actually kind of almost lived in our house. The astronauts had an exclusive with Life magazine at the time, and we had reporters who were in the house during the missions. Other reporters kind of camped out on the yard. Again, I thought this was just ordinary, right? They took pictures of me this month, my friends the next month. And what they did during Apollo 9, this is after the mission was over, and my dad had flown back. You actually don't see the whole thing, but I don't know what's going on with the slide. You can see the jets in the background at the top, but this is my dad, that's my brother, that's me. This is also me with my mom. I think I'd actually been bad and done something, and she was like scolding me. It's not a very great picture. But I show you this slide because right here is a story that I wrote in second grade during the mission. And it illustrates how ordinary this stuff was to me. In this story, and I will, okay, you can't see the top part of it. Again, I don't know why the slides are cutting off at the top. Can you see it there? Yeah. Yeah, can you scroll up a little bit? Or expand? I don't know. Well, that's this. That's all right. You can go back. We'll get the idea. We'll get the idea. In this little essay I wrote in second grade, what this is about, it's about a story of my family taking a trip to the moon. And I write all this stuff about how we travel up to the moon, and when we get up there, all of us started, well, when we're traveling up, we all start to float up into the capsule because there's no gravity. You know, I'm writing all this wonderful sciencey kind of stuff. When we get to the moon, you know, our father said, "We are on the moon." We all got out. You know, it's a typical sort of silly second grade story. And it goes on and talks about what happens when we're on the moon. A lot of it's the stuff my dad had told me when they hadn't been to the moon yet. This was before the moon mission. But they knew what would happen. There was less gravity, so you bounce around and you, instead of walking, you kind of bounce. There was lots of dust, you know, all this kind of stuff. Then we decided to go back home. When we were in the rocket, we floated up again, then we landed. When we stepped out of the rocket, it was cold. We went home. It was nice to be home, and we decided that next Saturday we would go to the zoo. Right? Because that's just like going to the moon. Seriously, I mean, seriously. The Life magazine people thought this was so sort of ironic that they published it in Life. So this is my first publication. But great, huh? And it's all been downhill since then. But again, it shows you this kind of mindset that people think that their own experience is what's ordinary, and it's what other people experience, and it's obviously not, right? And so when I moved to California, it was actually quite a difficult time for me because I had a lot of people who treated me differently because of my dad. And I had this notion of sort of celebrity stuff, people wanting to know me simply because of my father. And it was actually quite tough. I'm not quite sure why anyone wants to be famous. There's some perks that go along with it, but it's not really fun when you get down to some of those things. But again, what it taught me was that people are different, and we need to try and understand where people are coming from. The other thing it taught me was that being famous doesn't make you any different. Right? My dad was just this ordinary guy. And we met lots of famous people, and they're just ordinary people, right? We went to the White House, we had dinner with President Nixon, we spent the weekend at Camp David, you know, all this kind of stuff. But these people are just people. And everyone really is human at the root of it. And we should try to look at everybody in the same way, in a sense. So this is my kind of first point, is know yourself, and understanding yourself, you can try and begin to understand other people and try to get to know them and understand where they're coming from. Okay, so the second point, you start to know yourself, and then you start working and doing things in the world. And a big thing in my life is question tradition. And some of you who've taken my classes kind of know I talk about this occasionally. But this is a really important point, I think. We need to make our own choices. We need to understand ourselves, and we need to make our own choices and not do things simply because of tradition. And I love this quote. Humans are allergic to change. They love to say, "We've always done it this way." I try to fight that. This is a woman who was in the Navy, actually, and did a lot with IT in the Navy. But it's a really good thing to think about. We should not be doing things just because we've always done them that way. It's a really bad reason to do anything. Now, some traditions are fine, and some of them you may want to follow, but you should always ask why. Don't just do stuff because other people do it or because everyone's always done it that way. And let me give you an example of this. And again, sometimes I've talked about this in class. I've kind of had that in the back of my mind. I've kind of always been an unconventional person in some ways. But this really came out to the forefront in my mind when I was in college. And I had a serious boyfriend. and we talked about getting married. And one day he mentioned, you know, when we're married, it'll be really wonderful because you'll be Tracy Smith. I won't say his real last name because I don't want to I'll protect his identity. He said, you'll be Tracy Smith. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to be Tracy Smith. I'm Tracy Scott. I thought, what's that about, right? I'd never kind of thought about this, but he's talking about this and I'm thinking, well, why? Why should I change my name? Seriously, why? And, at the time I didn't really do much about it, but unfortunately I didn't end up with him, which is a good thing. But it really got me thinking. And I thought, okay, I want to understand what is this name change thing all about. So I went and I looked at the tradition and I looked at the reasons for it. And when you look at this notion of name change, it's about inequality, really. It is about women being property. This is why women only change their names, because in the past, this originated when women did not have any rights. Women couldn't vote, they couldn't own property. So what happened was they moved from being sort of owned by their fathers to being owned by their husbands, so they switched their name to go with the kind of control of the person that, in a sense, owned them, right? This is why women change their names. So I thought, well, that's really awful. I'm sure not going to change my name now, right? And I can understand people's reasons for wanting to have the same name when you get married, and I think that's fine. But why in the heck is it only the woman, right? Why don't people sit there and say, okay, whose name do we want? Let's think about this, right? Why don't men change their names? Why don't you pick the name that sounds the best, right? Seriously. I'm dead serious about this, right? It's really ridiculous that women still just change their names and never think about it. I want you to think about it. If you want to do it, it's fine, but think about it. And make the choice because you want to, not because people just say that's what you're supposed to do. I did not change my name at all. And fortunately, I met a man who didn't want me to change my name, which is great. And I'm going to show you another little illustration. I have some photos, so you'll like this. Okay, you can kind of see us. This is me and my husband. And you won't recognize us probably because this is like ancient history. He's also in the sociology department. We met in grad school. And he's very unconventional as well. And so when we got married, what we decided to do, the title of this slide, which you can't see, says Subverting Traditions. We decided to look at the symbolism in the wedding ceremony and not follow the stuff that we didn't like. So we changed it, right? No white dress for me. That symbolism is, not so great either. No veil, right? The veil is supposed to, again, it's sort of, the white dress and the veil are saying this woman is virginal, and not that, we won't get into that part of it. But she's unspoiled for her husband, right? And she's got the veil on, and when they get married, she takes the veil off because she's sort of his now. Again, it's this ownership thing. So no white dress for me, no veil. We went to the church together. We got ready together. None of this kind of like superstition stuff. We didn't do this woman walking down the aisle being handed off from the father to the husband. We both walked down the aisle with both parents. We didn't have the traditional bridegrooms and, or bridegrooms, that's good, isn't it? Groomsmen and bridesmaids. I only have one sibling, and it's a brother, so I had him and his wife, and my husband had his brother and sister stand up for him. So, we changed all of these things in a way that made sense for us. And it was symbolic of us having an equal partnership. So we changed those symbols. And I think it's important to do this or to think about it and do what works for you. Again, it may work for you to use some of the other traditions, and that's fine, but you should think about it. It's really important to think about these things. We also had a great reception with Mexican food and margaritas. That was really good too, by the ocean. Okay, so that's my point. What was that, point 2? Yeah, okay. Point 3, make your own path. Be open to serendipity, which I will define in a minute. Again, knowing yourself and questioning tradition allows you to develop and make your own path in the world, not just follow a path, but make one. And this is something that took me a long time to figure out. And many of you have heard about, and the title's here again, I'll explain this in a minute. A lot of you have heard my career story, and I'm not going to tell you the whole story tonight. I talk about it in my intro class. But This was what I thought my career path was going to look like when I was 18 years old. This is what I thought. This is what it actually ended up being, right? Not a straight line. But when I was 18, I thought, like a lot of people, you come up with an idea of what you want to do, you pick a college and you go to a college so that you can do that professional thing, you get that degree, and then you do it. I thought I wanted to go into business. I actually wanted to go to Berkeley because they had a BBA program, but I got into Stanford. I thought, oh, maybe I better go to Stanford. It has a better name, it's smaller, and it looks like a lot of fun, and it's beautiful. So I went there and I majored in econ because that's what you do if you go into business. I declared fall quarter of my freshman year. This is how sure I was. I knew what I was doing. And it did not work out that way. Again, from those of you that have heard my story, by the time I got to be a junior, I realized I wasn't sure I wanted to do business. I went ahead and finished the major anyway, but what I realized was that I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do something that worked for me, but I didn't know what that was. So I took what you now call our gap year, right? We didn't call it gap years then. But I decided that after undergrad, what I would do is just do something I wanted, something that I explore the world in a way that I thought was important, and try to figure out what was the right career path for me by taking this step of just doing something that I thought was important. And that step was going and living in London. I'd done study abroad when I was an undergrad in England, but I didn't really think it was a true cultural experience when I was living with 40 other American students in this manor house in the countryside in England. I mean, it was a great time, but it wasn't like I got to know very many English people. But I loved what I saw, and I thought, you know, I really want to get to know another culture. And when am I going to be able to do this? So I had another friend as an undergrad who'd done study abroad with me, and she wanted to do this as well. So we got student work permits. At the time, you could get a student work permit from an organization that would allow you to work in the UK for 6 months. So we got these student work permits. We worked over the summer after we graduated to earn some money. And then in October, we took a flight and we moved to London. No job, no place to live, no internet at the time. We just got on the plane and went. And it was great. It was great. Within 4 days, we both had jobs because the organization had kind of a job center you could go to. I stayed for 2 years, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the world. It was kind of the beginnings of my interest in different social groups and different cultures, you know, and it's kind of led on to other things. But what I want to show you, again, a couple of other quotes. You can't see the first one, that's all right. The second one is a really good one. It's all about making your own path, and you do that by actually doing something. You don't kind of sit back and let somebody else direct you, you direct yourself. And I like this quote. It said, "Vital lives are about action," right? You've got to get out there and do things and get out into the world and figure out what it is you want to do. You can't feel warmth unless you create it. You can't feel delight until you play. You can't know serendipity unless you risk. Here's this word serendipity. I love this word. I love this word. It means basically the phenomenon of finding valuable or agreeable things not sought for. It's these happy accidents that happen. Like tonight I have a happy accident that I wore this skirt that has this pocket that perfectly fits the little thing for the camera. That's serendipity, right? A happy accident. That's not that exciting, but right? You're like, oh, I wonder. You can't do this unless you risk and you do something unusual. And this happened to me in London. And I'll go to the next slide where, oh shoot, you can't see the top slide. Oh well. On the top slide are legs that you can see. This is a slide when I was in London on Hampstead Heath with friends of mine that I made there. This woman here, Miriam, she's the first person I met in London my first day in the bookshop. And she's still one of my best friends. This is serendipity. I met her, we established this great friendship, and then many hundreds of years later, I end up at Emory, directing a summer study abroad in London, where I get to see her every other year, right? These are these things that if you get out and you get into the world and you do these things and meet people, you never know what's going to come back around. I feel so fortunate to have ended up back in a place where I can go back to London. I really wanted to stay there. When I lived there for the couple of years, I was hoping I would stay there forever. I tried to marry an Englishman so I could do that, but he didn't cooperate, which is a good thing because he's still not married. I saw him not long ago, and he's had these serial sort of 3-year-long relationships. I thought, I'm glad I didn't end up with that. But this is the sort of thing, again, you need to make decisions that work for you, and you need to explore. And you need to find things that you're interested in, that you do well, and then just start taking that path. So again, I could tell you more about my career. I may do a little career night next semester for people who are seniors who are thinking about this stuff. But the point is to take a risk, take a chance, do something that you want to do, and you never know how it's going to end up. So I had many different sort of career turns, but I end up being able to go back to London on a regular basis and see these friends. Another really good friend of mine who's not in the picture is the person that I stay with every summer when I'm in London. We were both very poor in London at the time, but she's since married a wealthy lawyer, and she herself makes a lot of money, and they have this amazing flat in London, and I stay with them every summer. So again, more serendipity. Okay. Next one. This is what it's all about for me. The golden rule. Love one another, right? Most of you have probably heard of the golden rule. And for me, this is the ethic I try to live by. This is what really motivates me in terms of the work that I do, in terms of, trying to create a path, in terms of living my life every day. This is what it's about for me. And I give you, again, you're not going to be able to see the first quote, and I'm sorry about that. The golden rule is an ethic that we find in most religious traditions, most cultural traditions in the world. You tend to find this ethic, which is very interesting to me. So even though my background is as an Episcopalian when I was growing up, and I've got the Bible quote down here, the one at the top is Confucius, and it's very similar. This is an ethic that tends to span a lot of cultures and a lot of religions. And I think that's because there's so much truth in it. The reason I put these quotes up is because both of them have these kind of seekers questioning the sage. You have a scribe that's questioning Confucius, and you have a teacher of the law who's questioning Jesus and saying, what is the most important ethic to live by? And again, Confucius says, basically, the thing that guides everything else is, and I can't, it's don't do to other people what you wouldn't want them to do to you. It's kind of the negative version of it. For Jesus, what it is love your neighbor as yourself. But again, many of these cultures have similar ethics, and I think it's really important. And I won't go into lots more on that. But I try to, again, live my life by that. Part of the reason for the work that I chose to do was to try and contribute in a way that does that cares for people, that gives back to them. The other part of this, though, is can sound simple and trite, right? Love other people. Oh yeah, that's easy, right? You meet nice people and you're nice to them and it's fine. Well, the hard part of this is loving people you don't like. That's the part that's hard. And I have a couple of examples that I think are quite interesting. And again, you're not going to see the first quote, but I'll tell you what it is. From mentors of mine that really taught me this lesson. Because it's a challenging thing to really live out the golden rule. And the first incident came when I was doing my master's in theology at Fuller Seminary. And I was in an ethics class. Most of the people at the seminary were going on to be pastors. I was not. I was doing the degree so that I could hopefully learn about something besides econ, so I could go get a PhD in something besides econ. So I was doing my theology degree because I thought I'd get a PhD in religion. I turned that into sociology of religion. But in this ethics class, we were having this debate about a pretty hot button topic, which I won't mention. But there was a person in the class who seemed to be really dogmatic and really not very sympathetic, and she was just like, this is the only way it is, and everyone else is wrong, and blah, blah, blah. And I was getting really upset about this, and I was getting exasperated at her. And the professor called me out, because I was sort of saying, you need to tolerate other people, you need to sort of understand everyone's viewpoint. And he said to me, the most difficult thing is for tolerant people to be tolerant of intolerant people, right? Yeah, I was the one that was being bad. And it was a really good lesson, and it's very hard for me. My whole family is of a different political persuasion than I am, and it's really tough sometimes to deal with that, right? Especially my mother's husband, who really baits people who aren't like him. And it's very hard for me sometimes to treat him in a way that's loving, because he really exasperates me. But this is something that you need to do. The other incident, again, people that modeled this to me in a way that was quite profound at the time. In my next phase of graduate school in the PhD program in Soch at Princeton, my teaching mentor there, Viviana Zelizer, who is a wonderful woman, she was teaching a class on sex and gender. And on the first day of this graduate class, there were 3 people in the class: my future husband, who I didn't realize at the time was going to be my future husband, and me, and one other guy he and I were in the same cohort. It was our first year, and he was from Azerbaijan. And it was the first time that country had sort of opened up to the West and let people come out and study in the US. So he was in a really different cultural environment. But on the first day of this class, it's about gender, he tells a joke about rape in this class, right? Okay, now you all should know this is not what you should do, right? In a class on gender, in front of the faculty member, this is a Soch class, he tells this joke about rape. And it was really uncomfortable. And the thing that both my husband and I remember is Viviana's response to him. She said, "I will not let your ideology blind me to your humanity. Even though you have a reprehensible ideology, I'm still going to treat you as a human being, because that's what I need to do, even though I think what you've just said is horrific." She said this and just moved on with the class. And I thought that was such a good thing to do. And this guy, he said some inappropriate things, but I would never have gotten through stats without him. He was extremely helpful, and he helped me through all my stuff. So, they're good. There's good to people and there's bad to people, but you have to take them as they come. And if you truly live by these ethics of the golden rule, it means you have to love everyone, not just the people who are easy to love. And it's not always an easy thing to do. And that kind of brings me to the last point, which is all of that kind of ethic you have to live every day and every moment. The only time that we have to live is in the present. Now is the only time we have to do anything, right? To do anything good, to do anything loving, is now. And so many people plan for the future that they completely forget about living what they're doing right now. And I think this is really important. I saw a lot of people do this as an undergrad. They said, I'm going to go out and get this great job, and in 20 years I'm going to make all this money, and I'm going to be able to retire and do what I want. What about those 20 years, right? They're miserable for 20 years. And what if they never get to the end? What if something happens to them before they get to that retirement? It's not worth it. You have to live every moment, and you have to try and enjoy it, right? So, this is the other part. I tried to find a career that I thought would contribute to people, but a lot of that's about living each day in a way that contributes, even in small ways, to people that you meet. So, at the end, we have to try and put all these things into place each day in little moments, in any way that you can kind of connect with people. And enjoy it. You need to enjoy the journey, right? So, again, I hope, yes, the whole quote is here. This is a really great quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson that I like a lot. To finish the moment, to find the journey's end in every step of the road, to live the greatest number of good hours is wisdom, right? That's what it's about. Every step of the road, you need to make it the fullest. That's what I try to live by. And you have to laugh a lot. And so I put this really silly picture in here at the end of me and my husband and our nieces and nephew. You got to laugh a lot. And that's the key to my marriage, is that we laugh a lot. Seriously. We enjoy each other. We enjoy our time together. We like doing the same things, and my husband's really funny. So it's a good time. It's a good time. And you got to laugh. Humor's a wonderful connector of people. So these are my 5 points. I hope something's resonated for you. There are many more points, and if this was actually my last lecture, I would keep you a lot longer than this. And I would tell you many more things. I would make you sit here for a long time if I knew I couldn't say anything else. Hopefully I'll get to say something else. But those are major important things for me. So I don't know, I think I've done my time. I don't know do you all want to go eat? You can ask me questions. You can ask me questions afterwards. I'm always happy to talk. I don't know what you want to do, Jessica.
You guys can we'll start serving food, make you guys some food and stick around and chat and ask your questions or talk to the alumni. So thank you for coming and
thank you all. Thanks.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University. Please visit us at emory.edu.